Hello and welcome to the CX Files for November 30th, 2023. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan, back in Montreal, safe and sound. Mark, great to catch up with you. And we're finishing off November, I think, with a bang this week with an amazing discussion when it comes to generative AI.
That's excellent. That's really great. And, there's only going to be a couple more interviews this year because I know that we'll be taking a short break over Christmas for a couple of weeks. But, definitely AI has been really the subject of this year. And I know you were talking with Teleperformance this time about it, weren't you?
Yeah, exactly. And as we talk a little bit about what's going on with generative AI, I think that we have to be very clear that there are very few organizations that are as, how would we say, as proactive or as diligent in terms of being able to drive the generative AI discussion from a frontline perspective, as well as different elements from the standpoint of operations. And that's why we caught up with Sid Mukherjee, who is the Chief Digital Officer at Teleperformance. And he joined me from his residence in the Bay Area of San Francisco, which in November 30th in Montreal sounds very appealing to be in right now. But, one of the things about Sid that I really like, Mark, is that he brings a very real world approach to generative AI, about the different dynamics around generative AI to the discussion, to the table. It's not a lot of 40,000 foot view science fiction when you're sitting down and chatting with Sid about the different elements around artificial intelligence. It's very much the practicalities. What can generative AI deliver in the near term to drive better CX? Where is it going in the medium to long term? And what should organizations be thinking about when it comes to their generative AI strategy?
Yeah, that's great because, clearly there's so much misinformation about this subject out there. And, I've actually had some calls this morning with other companies where they've been sort of talking about the difference between what you're reading about in the media, which is, all jobs are vanishing and contact centers no longer require people. And the reality on the ground of, what tasks can we use this technology to augment rather than people that can be replaced. So clearly there's a reality check required here.
There's a reality check, and Mark, at the end of the day, and I talked to Sid about this, we've seen this movie before. We know how it ends. Do you remember a decade ago when automation was coming back to the forefront and it was going to kill the call center? It was going to get rid of all the jobs. Nothing could have been further from the truth. And this is why when we hear this malarkey out there about how AI is going to be eliminating 80%, 90% of all the different contact center jobs, no, it's not. I mean, it's going to augment the performance of agents. It's certainly going to rationalize some elements of frontline CX delivery and maybe take some human interactions out of the space. But by no means should anybody anticipate that there is going to be some whole-scale culling of contact center agents from remote working or from the center. AI is going to help people do their jobs better. It's going to help consumers get service better. But by no means is there going to be any widespread removal of the human element from the CX dynamic.
Okay, excellent. Well, for a roundup on what's really taking place in AI, let's go to your interview with Sid Mukherjee at TP.
Sounds great.
The whole topic of generative AI is one that certainly has, I think, sucked up a lot of oxygen in the different boardrooms of CX organizations around the world over the course of the past 12 months. And to discuss this very interesting phenomenon and sort of where we're at now, a bit of a reality check, I'm so excited to welcome Sid Mukherjee, who is the Chief Digital Officer from Teleperformance, who is joining me live from his home in the Bay Area of California. Sid, great to see you.
Likewise, Peter. Thank you for having me on your talk show.
Hey, it's a pleasure for me to have you. I have been working with your organization now for nearly 2 decades. And one of the things I've always said about Teleperformance is that it's truly cutting edge in all aspects of the whole customer experience life cycle. And I think this is why it's so apropos, Sid, that we're able to get you on for a chat today. Generative AI, as I mentioned in the introduction, has really been taking up a lot of the space, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's at conferences, whether it's just been in face-to-face discussions people have been having about the whole CX industry. So I wanted to get a sense from you as the chief digital officer at really the world's largest standalone CX business services company. Can you give me a sense about 12 months into this hype cycle that we've been hearing about things like ChatGPT, generative AI, all the different iterations of this, where is it sitting right now in regards to the hype cycle? Where do you feel that we are at with generative AI when it comes to customer experience management, its functionality, and where it really sits in the whole ecosystem?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great question, Peter. I think definitely there's been a lot of hype and the media frenzy is just added to it. In fact, Gartner came out with its hype cycle for AI recently, and generative AI sits right at the top of inflated expectations. That's Gartner's language, not mine, right? And then, as you know, in the Gartner cycle, it goes through the peak of the trough of disillusionment and then onto the plateau of productivity. So Gartner predicts that Gen AI is still at a very early formative stage and will probably take another 5 to 10 years to see any kind of meaningful enterprise scale adoption. And I think that's what we are also understanding from all the customer conversations that we are having, that it's still very early stage. There is definitely reason for optimism, but that has to be baked with a high degree of caution as well. The optimism comes from the fact that Gen AI will definitely help the customer journeys, both the end customers as well as the agents. On the one hand, customers will be able to self-serve better for less complicated kind of requirements through bots. And on the other hand, artificial intelligence will augment human agents to become super agents with Gen AI powered agent assistants, knowledge bots to effortlessly help them handle complex inquiries. The caution that I also think is necessary is because the technology is not yet ready. And even the technology guys who are really at the forefront of this innovation, folks at Microsoft, OpenAI, everyone's exercising caution. In fact, Microsoft's President Brad Smith was quoted recently as saying that we have to ensure AI remains subject to human control. And the fact is that ChatGPT and tools like these are black boxes. These are models which are probabilistic and not deterministic, and one can't be 100% sure of the output, right? And that's why there's this whole sort of risk of model hallucinations, right? Answers which are not realistic or not correct. And in fact, Ilya Sutskever, who's the chief scientist at OpenAI, said in an interview recently that the thing that he'd really like to see is reliability and controllability. Reliability means you can trust the model's output, and controllability means that you can control it. So yeah, in a nutshell, Peter, I think it's still very early days. There's definitely a lot of potential, but we have to be aware of the risks associated with it as well.
Yeah, and I'm really glad to hear you say that, because potential is one thing, but being market ready, being ready for prime time, to use a very badly overused cliche, is a very much a different thing. And Sid, you and I were chatting a couple of days ago, and one of the things that I think came up when we were having our discussion was that whole concept that I floated to you 20 years ago, that there used to be the cool technology versus the practical technology. And it's great to have cool technology. It's great to be exploring what things can do, how you can apply things potentially in a certain way. But being able to market cool technology before it's fully baked is just a recipe for insanity. And you and I have seen this movie before. You and I have seen different solutions come onto the market, be marketed or be brought out to as standalone offerings, have fallen flat on their faces, and they're never heard from again. And I have a sense that when it comes to generative AI, the potential for organizations to be too enthusiastic, bring solutions or offerings to the marketplace that are just not quite ready, could really lead to that direction as well.
No, 100%. And, I don't think people should fall for AI just as the new shiny object. I think, we've seen that movie before. We definitely see huge potential from AI, though. And I think
Oh,
that's
yeah.
where
Yeah.
we have to be pragmatic, have to start to pilot and test things, not necessarily burn millions of dollars of cash. These could be low-cost experiments. Calling a service like an OpenAI GPT 3.5 doesn't really break the bank, right? So I think there is definitely scope for low-cost innovation. And as you start to see the results, you want to scale that further, obviously build on the use cases, look to identify the right set of partners, mitigate against all the risks that you normally have when it comes to large scale new technologies.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit near to medium term, Sid. I'm
Yeah.
really curious to find out from your perspective, where do you see the sweet spots in the CX arena for generative AI?
Yeah. Look, we've been in this industry for such a long time. If I look at all the hundreds and thousands of, customer transformations that we've done, finally, the objectives of all of those transformation journeys comes back to how do you keep on elevating the customer satisfaction, the CSAT, NPS on the one hand, while reducing the cost to serve on the other hand, right? And I think Gen AI definitely has potential to help with that. So at Teleperformance today, we are working within the customer experience domain, conducting multiple pilots with the objectives of reducing handling times, improving accuracy, improving speed to proficiency, and in general, doing things faster, safer, and more cost effectively for our clients. Now, the real power of Gen AI lies in summarization and natural language generation, right? So we are using it to understand customer intent and sentiment in real time. We are proactively prompting agents based on that customer intent. We are augmenting knowledge-based searches with targeted response generation. We are helping agents create responses to emails and chats at the click of a button. Translating from multiple different languages into the agent's language and back, triggering auto fulfillment of agent promises made during the conversation, auto populating post call wrap up notes, automating quality audits for 100% of the customer interactions, unlike in the past where only 2 to 3% of the calls would get audited. Now with AI, you have the potential of looking at the entire universe of customer interactions and then generating actionable insights from those conversations. And also things like simulating calls for agent training, giving coaching tips for agents on the fly, so on and so forth. So I think there are many different use cases being piloted. I think generative AI definitely has a lot of potential, especially in our industry, which faces a lot of churn. Yep. It really helps bridge the knowledge gap between a tenured agent and a new agent who's just starting out. So I think definitely room for optimism, and we'll see how it goes. But one will need to place their bets in terms of where one gets the maximum bang for the investment that one is making.
I really like the direction you're going down with what you just said, Sid, because in my opinion, well, the hype cycle, I think we can all agree, has really been focused on it's going to get rid of agents and everything is going to be automation powered by AI. What you've just given is, I think, a much more pragmatic and realistic scope of the different functions that AI can do on a generative basis to actually help agents not only do their jobs better, but enjoy their jobs. And the reality is, if we can have people that are enjoying what they're doing, that are in a position to be able to really gain a sense of the intrinsic rewards that anybody who took an MBA in the 1990s like I did, we have this shoved down our throats, but there's actually truth to it. People want to feel good about what they're doing. And if these tools can be adapted in the near to medium term, as you've just given a few examples around, that's going to do a heck of a lot, I think, to reduce that churn, to reduce attrition, which will lower costs and increase end user satisfaction, which is what this game's all about.
100% agree with you. And I think that's where organizations struggle the most. I think, whenever any disruptive technology comes in, the last mile of human behavior change and change management is what enterprises struggle with the most. It's in the adoption. And now with generative AI, we have Copilot sitting on our desktop, right? Microsoft's already embedded it in PowerPoint, Excel. You can create slides on the fly. It's really now up to the end users to start to use these tools to make themselves more efficient, right? Because obviously folks who are overhyping this out of proportion are going to say that AI will take away human jobs. But the truth is, as somebody else said, not me, the guy who's the person who's taking away the job is a better skilled human being, is someone who's more equipped with AI, who's an early adopter. And those guys will take away the jobs of the naysayers, people who don't want to learn and move on. So I think we have to be smart in our organizations to drive up the adoption of technology also by reskilling people, by getting fresh blood as well. That's often the last mile, which is the challenge.
Okay, so Sid, let's talk about that elephant in the room. Let's talk about this whole idea longer term, the ability of an organization to perhaps reduce their headcount by incorporating bots that are AI powered to provide, whether it's voice-based service or digital service. Where do you see this alignment happening longer term? Where do you see the potential for generative AI to start being more customer facing?
Yeah, look, Peter, longer term, there's no denying that, across the entire customer experience value chain, AI will have a big impact. Yeah, it's hard to imagine any area of CX which will remain untouched by AI. So in that sense, I genuinely think that AI will be omnipresent. I think as end customers, we've already started seeing it for a number of years, whether it's a Google Assistant or a Siri or an Alexa, and now Microsoft Copilots. We have these AI bots, to help us during our day, to help us manage our time better, etc. And I think we'll only see more and more of that, when we deal with our banks, or when we deal with our healthcare provider, or when we deal with our telecom provider, and so on. I think when you look at the BPO side or the operations side of it, regardless of whether it's BPO or in-house operations, we will see AI across the entire life cycle of the agent life cycle. So right from when you are recruiting people, generative AI will have a big role in terms of creating job descriptions, in terms of assessing the applicant's fitment with the job profile, in terms of helping shortlist resumes before actual human recruiters have to pick up the phone and interview people, right? It really will ease the job of the entire HR engine trying to recruit people. And then when you're onboarding, generative AI can help with preparing offer letters, answering onboarding questions. And then finally, when you have them join, with training, with simulating customer journeys and interactions so that new agents can bridge that knowledge gap with respect to tenured agents. And finally, in operations, like we discussed earlier, the real-time agent assistance, the guided workflows, the knowledge co-pilots, etc., all with that same objective of really helping talent scale at a faster pace and be able to respond more and more to the complex inquiries. Because, I think we would all agree that AI is definitely going to take away and automate some of the transactional kind of activities, some of the simpler interactions. So what will be left behind will be the more complex interactions where you need human empathy and you need human ingenuity, right? Because there will always be more and more of such scenarios as well to go along with the simpler inquiries. So I think, in a nutshell, I'm going to say longer term there'll be AI everywhere, in the customer service operations, in the lives of the end customers as well. But at the same time, humans aren't going anywhere either. There's going to be a greater reliance on human knowledge and experience, and that's why it's going to be important to bridge make sure that the new joiners are as proficient as the old timers, and to make sure that they have all the information at their disposal to help with the complex inquiries that customers will call in regarding.
Okay, so this is great. Last question I've got for you here. Put yourself in the shoes of a harried CX decision maker on the enterprise side, on the outsource side. You're being bombarded with conflicting messages around generative AI. You don't understand what's going on, or you've got a sense about what's happening, but you're just not quite certain about how to proceed. What's your advice for such an individual that's looking to try and make the best of generative AI and to understand exactly how it can apply to their own CX, I suppose you could say delivery center or operation? Where do they start? What's a good starting point for them to really start navigating this labyrinth of messaging that's out there, and as you say, the hype cycle?
I think as a first one would want to start to subscribe to Peter's podcast so that they can hear it directly from
I'm not going to say which one.
from industry analysts like yourselves who are all following this topic really closely. But I know jokes aside, there's so much thought leadership, there's so much insight being put out there as well. You just have to make sure that you're not you take the bias out of the rhetoric and you focus on the real essence of the message, and what is the real sort of value that you can expect from any of these new tools. And I think the real holy grail of innovation is only when you start to test these out yourself, when you start to learn from them, because you will make mistakes when you pilot. Some pilots will be more successful than others, and then you scale those pilots, right? Those are the bets that you have to place. So I think test, learn, and scale is the cycle that you have to go through. I would definitely think that one should not try and do everything by themselves. So along the way, identify the partners that can help you on this journey, upskill your employees, like I was saying earlier, take the fear of AI out of them. Make sure that you have a data strategy in place, because most enterprise organizations have extremely siloed data. It's important to have a robust data lake that stores all your enterprise data and helps create that single view of the customer that we all talk about, fix any data quality issues that might cause biases or hallucinations, and be aware of AI's blind spots. Always keep the human in the loop to be able to deal with those biases. Keep the human, whether it's the end customer or the agent, at the center of your AI strategy. The most successful companies of the future will be those that balance high tech with high touch, or in other words, blend AI with human empathy. So it's going to be important to continuously test, learn, and scale to be really successful at broadly adopting AI in the organization.
Test, learn, and scale. I like that. We've got our mantra down for the future of generative AI as it comes to CX. So, Sid Mukherjee, from your home in the Bay Area, we really appreciate your time today. It's always a pleasure catching up with you. And certainly, I think this is a topic that we at the CX Files are going to be watching closely for quite some time. So the enlightenment you've given us just in terms of your opinion, what you've been observing, and the way forward, greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Peter. You're very kind. I'm learning myself like everyone else is. But thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.